The text message that would change everything arrived on my phone at 11:30 on a Tuesday morning, while I was underneath my Peterbilt, changing the oil in preparation for another winter season of deliveries up the mountain. My name is Rick Ashford, and for the past 8 years, I had been running heating oil deliveries up to Pine Ridge Estates, a gated community perched high in the Colorado Rockies, about 20 miles outside of Boulder. The community sat at an elevation of 9,000 feet, accessible only by a winding mountain road that turned treacherous the moment the first snow fell. Every winter, I made that drive 3 times a week, hauling thousands of gallons of heating oil in my diesel truck to keep 75 families from freezing to death in their expensive mountain homes. The text was from Margaret Chen, the property manager at Pine Ridge Estates. "Rick, need to call you about new HOA regulations. Please contact me ASAP." I wiped the oil off my hands and dialed her number, not thinking much of it. Margaret had always been reasonable, one of the few people in that community who understood that mountain living required practical solutions, not suburban fantasies. "Rick, thank you for calling back," Margaret said, and I could hear the stress in her voice immediately. "I wanted to give you a heads up before the official notice goes out. The HOA board passed a new set of environmental regulations last night." "Okay," I said slowly, already sensing this was not going to be good news. "They have banned all diesel vehicles from operating within the community effective December 1st. I stood there in my garage, phone pressed to my ear, certain I had misheard. "I am sorry, could you repeat that?" The new board president, Patricia Whitmore, pushed through a comprehensive green initiative. No diesel vehicles are allowed on community property starting December 1st. This includes delivery vehicles. December 1st was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks before the serious cold set in. 3 weeks before these people would need their heating oil tanks filled regularly to survive the Colorado winter. "Margaret, you understand that my truck runs on diesel, right? The truck that delivers your heating oil." "I know," she said quietly. I tried to explain that to the board. Patricia would not listen. She said there are electric delivery vehicles now and we need to do our part for the environment. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Electric delivery vehicles. For hauling 6,000 gallons of heating oil up a mountain in a blizzard. Has this woman ever lived in the real world? "She moved here from San Francisco 6 months ago," Margaret said, which explained everything. "Who else is on this board?" "Patricia is the president. Vice president is Linda Hendricks. She is new too, from Seattle. Treasurer is Donald Walsh. He has been here 3 years. Secretary is Jennifer Carmichael, also relatively new. The only long-term resident on the board is Tom Bradley, and he voted against this, but it was 4-1. So 4 people who do not understand mountain winters just ban the only truck that can reliably deliver their heating oil. That is the situation, yes. I took a deep breath, trying to think through the logistics. What about propane delivery, mail trucks, garbage collection? They are all diesel. The propane company uses diesel, garbage company uses diesel, USPS uses diesel. They all got the same notice I am about to send you. This is insane." "I agree, but my hands are tied. I work for the HOA, Rick. I am sorry." I thanked her for the warning and hung up, staring at my truck. This Peterbilt was not just any truck. I had bought it specifically for mountain work, with a reinforced chassis, upgraded brakes, chains for the tires, and an engine powerful enough to pull a full load up a steep grade in the snow. The idea that I could replace it with some electric vehicle that probably could not make it halfway up the mountain was absurd. The official notice arrived via email an hour later. It was 3 pages of bureaucratic language about environmental responsibility, carbon footprints, and community standards. Buried in the middle was the key paragraph. Effective December 1st, 2024, all diesel-powered vehicles are prohibited from entering or operating within Pine Ridge Estates property boundaries. This includes but is not limited to personal vehicles, commercial vehicles, and delivery vehicles. Violations will result in fines of $500 per incident. I called my lawyer, Steve Morrison, and read him the notice. "Can they do this?" I asked. "Technically, yes," Steve said. "HOAs have broad authority to regulate what happens on their property. If they want to ban diesel vehicles, they can ban diesel vehicles. The question is whether it is smart or enforceable. It is neither. Probably not, but that does not make it illegal. Have you signed any contracts with them?" "I have a verbal agreement with the property management company." "No formal contract. Then you are free to stop servicing them whenever you want. They cannot force you to deliver heating oil." An idea was forming in my mind. What if I just stop? What if I let them figure out how to get heating oil up that mountain without diesel trucks? Steve was quiet for a moment. "That would certainly make your point. But Rick, we are talking about 75 families. It is going to be a cold winter. Then they should not have banned the trucks that keep them warm." I spent the next 2 days making phone calls. First, I contacted every other heating oil company within 100 miles of Pine Ridge Estates. They all used diesel trucks. None of them were willing to invest in electric vehicles for one community, especially not vehicles that probably could not handle the mountain road anyway. The electric trucks currently on the market were designed for flat urban routes, not steep mountain grades with ice and snow. Then I called the propane company, the garbage collection service, and even the USP supervisor for the area. They were all in the same boat. The Postal Service was particularly frustrated because federal law required them to deliver mail, but they could not do it without their diesel trucks. On Friday, I drove up to Pine Ridge Estates for what I assumed would be my last delivery. The road was already getting slippery with the first light snow of the season, nothing serious yet, but enough to remind everyone what was coming. The security guard at the gate, Marcus, waved me through with a sympathetic look. "Heard about the diesel ban, man. That is crazy." "Did you hear they are banning your diesel truck too?" I asked. His face fell. "What? Security vehicles, maintenance vehicles, all diesel. You guys run diesel trucks, right?" "Every single one of our vehicles is diesel. How are we supposed to patrol the community?" "You will have to ask Patricia Whitmore." I made my deliveries that day, filling tanks at 12 different houses. At each stop, I mentioned the new regulation and explained that this would be my last delivery unless the HOA changed their policy. The reactions ranged from confusion to anger to disbelief. At the last house, I ran into Tom Bradley, the one board member who had voted against the ban. He was a retired engineer, probably in his mid-60s, who had lived in Pine Ridge Estates for almost 20 years. "Rick, I want you to know I fought this as hard as I could," he said as I finished filling his tank. "Patricia railroaded this through. She scheduled the vote with less than 24 hours' notice, so most of the community did not even know it was happening." "That legal?" I asked. "Technically, yes. The bylaws require 12 hours' notice for board votes. She gave 18, but it was sneaky as hell." "What is her problem with diesel?" Tom shook his head. "She thinks she is saving the planet. She moved here with all these ideas about making Pine Ridge an eco-friendly showcase community. Solar panels, electric vehicles, composting programs. Some of it is not bad, but she does not understand that we are not in San Francisco anymore. This is the Rockies. Winters are brutal." We need reliable infrastructure, not green fantasies. You all are going to freeze when I stop delivering. I know. So do the other 3 board members, but they would not listen. Patricia is very persuasive and Linda backs her up on everything. Donald and Jennifer are new to the board and did not want to oppose the president. What about the rest of the community? Can they override the board? Technically, yes. If we can get 20% of homeowners to sign a petition, we can force a special meeting and a community vote. But that takes time, and Patricia knows it. She is betting that by the time anyone organizes opposition, winter will be here and we will have figured out alternatives. There are no alternatives, I said flatly. I know that. You know that. She does not believe it. I left Pine Ridge Estates that afternoon with a check for my services and a deep sense of frustration. These people had built their dream homes in one of the most beautiful and harsh environments in Colorado. And now, they were finding out that their HOA president cared more about virtue signaling than keeping them alive. The following Monday, December 1st arrived with 6 inches of fresh snow and temperatures in the teens. My phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. The first call was from a panicked homeowner named Susan Richardson. "Rick, my heating oil tank is at 20%. I need a delivery today." "I cannot deliver to Pine Ridge Estates anymore," I explained. "The HOA banned diesel trucks. That is ridiculous. How am I supposed to get heating oil? You will have to ask your HOA board." The calls continued all morning. By noon, I had received 32 calls from Pine Ridge residents, all saying the same thing. Their tanks were getting low, they needed deliveries, and what did I mean I could not come up there anymore? I sent a mass email to everyone in my customer database explaining the situation. The diesel ban was not my choice. I would be happy to resume deliveries the moment the ban was lifted, but until then, my hands were tied. The response was immediate and explosive. My email was forwarded throughout the Pine Ridge community, and by that evening, the HOA's email system was apparently melting down from the volume of complaints. Margaret Chen called me Tuesday morning. "Rick, the HOA is in crisis mode. Half the community is out of heating oil or close to it. Patricia is insisting there must be electric delivery options. There are not. I told her that. She does not believe me. She wants to schedule a meeting with you to discuss alternatives. There are no alternatives to discuss. Please, Rick, just take the meeting. Maybe if she hears it from you directly, she will understand." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at the Pine Ridge Estates Community Center. I arrived to find not just Patricia Whitmore, but the entire HOA board, Margaret Chen, and about 40 angry residents packed into the meeting room. The temperature outside had dropped to 8 degrees, and the forecast called for a major storm over the weekend. Patricia Whitmore was exactly what I expected. Mid-40s, perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive outdoor clothing that had probably never seen actual outdoor use, and an expression that suggested she was used to getting her way through sheer force of personality. "Mr. Ashford, thank you for coming," she said, though her tone suggested this was more of a summons than a request. "We need to discuss your refusal to deliver heating oil to our community." "I have not refused anything," I said calmly. "Your HOA banned diesel vehicles. My truck is diesel. Therefore, I cannot deliver. There must be alternative vehicles you can use. There are not." "I have done research," Patricia said, pulling out a tablet. "Tesla makes electric semi-trucks. Rivian makes electric delivery vehicles. Several companies are developing electric commercial trucks, none of which can haul 6,000 gallons of heating oil up a mountain in the snow," I said. "The Tesla Semi is not in full production yet, and even when it is, The range and power are not sufficient for mountain work. Rivian makes light-duty delivery vans for urban use. They cannot handle this terrain or this weight. That seems like an excuse. The room erupted. 40 voices started shouting at once, all directed at Patricia. I let them vent for a minute before raising my hand for quiet. Mrs. Whitmore, let me explain something about mountain logistics. That road up to Pine Ridge gains 2,000 feet in elevation over 5 miles. In winter, it is covered in ice and snow. My truck weighs 40,000 pounds fully loaded. It requires a powerful diesel engine, specialized tires, chains, and upgraded brakes just to make the trip safely. Electric vehicles do not have the power, the range, or the reliability for this work. That is not my opinion. That is physics. Other communities must face this same challenge, Patricia said. They do, and they all use diesel trucks. That is why diesel trucks exist. Linda Hendricks, the vice president, spoke up. What about biodiesel? That is environmentally friendly. Biodiesel freezes at higher temperatures than regular diesel, I explained. It is useless in Colorado winters. Compressed natural gas, Jennifer Carmichael suggested. CNG trucks exist, but they have less power and shorter range than diesel. Plus, I would have to spend $200,000 converting my truck, which I am not going to do for one community. Patricia's face was getting red. You are being deliberately obstinate. I am being realistic. You ban the only technology that can reliably deliver heating oil up a mountain in winter. This is your problem, not mine. One of the residents stood up, an older man I recognized as Harold Jenkins. Patricia, this is insane. We are going to freeze. You need to reverse this policy immediately. We cannot compromise our environmental principles, Patricia said. Environmental principles. Harold's voice rose. I will tell you what is not environmental. 75 families burning wood fires to stay warm because they cannot get heating oil. You know what comes from wood fires? Smoke. Particulates. Actual air pollution. Heating oil burns clean in comparison. More residents joined in, and the meeting dissolved into chaos. Patricia tried to maintain control, but she had clearly lost the room. Even Linda Hendricks looked uncertain now, realizing perhaps that this had been a terrible mistake. Finally, Tom Bradley stood up and waited for quiet. I move that we suspend the diesel ban immediately pending further study and community input. Second, said at least 5 voices. Patricia banged her gavel. This is not a community meeting. The board will take this under advisement. When? Demanded Harold. At our next scheduled board meeting in 2 weeks. The room exploded again. 2 weeks meant Christmas. 2 weeks meant the worst of the winter weather. 2 weeks meant empty heating oil tanks and potentially frozen pipes, which could cause tens of thousands of dollars in damage. I stood up. For what it is worth, I am willing to resume deliveries the moment the ban is lifted, but not before. I am not paying $500 fines for doing my job. I walked out of the meeting, leaving the chaos behind me. As I drove down the mountain, passing 2 other heating oil trucks heading the opposite direction before turning back, word had apparently spread, I felt no satisfaction. This was not personal. I did not enjoy watching people suffer. But sometimes, people needed to learn that actions had consequences. The storm hit Friday night, dumping 2 feet of snow on Pine Ridge estates. Temperatures dropped below zero. My phone exploded with desperate calls, but I held firm. No deliveries until the ban was lifted. Saturday afternoon, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was Donald Walsh, the HOA treasurer. Mr. Ashford, I need to speak with you confidentially. Patricia does not know I am making this call. I am listening. The board is splitting. Tom, Jennifer, and I want to lift the ban immediately. Patricia and Linda are refusing. They are saying this is all your fault for not being willing to adapt. Adapt to what? Physics? I know. Listen, I am prepared to call for a vote of no confidence in Patricia's leadership. But that takes time and people are suffering now. Is there any way you could make deliveries and we could agree not to enforce the fines? Are you asking me to break the HOA's own rules? I am asking you to help us fix a terrible mistake. I thought about it. No. If I deliver now, Patricia claims she was right all along, that the ban was not a real problem. The only way this gets fixed permanently is if the consequences are real and immediate. I am sorry, but you all need to feel the full weight of this decision. Donald was quiet for a long moment. I understand. For what it is worth, I agree with you. Sunday brought a new development. The propane company that serviced Pine Ridge Estates announced they were suspending deliveries due to the diesel ban. So did the garbage collection company. The security company informed the HOA that their patrol vehicles could not operate under the current restrictions. By Monday morning, Pine Ridge Estates was effectively cut off from essential services. The internal roads had not been plowed because the snowplow was diesel. Garbage was piling up. Propane customers were running out. Security was reduced to one guard at the front gate. That afternoon, I received a certified letter from Patricia Whitmore's personal attorney, threatening to sue me for breach of contract and demanding immediate resumption of heating oil deliveries. I called Steve Morrison and read him the letter. She is bluffing, Steve said immediately. You have no contract, and even if you did, she cannot force you to violate her own HOA regulations. Send a response pointing this out and stating clearly that you will resume deliveries the moment the diesel ban is lifted, not before. Steve drafted a response that was professional but firm. We sent it the same day. Tuesday brought news that 3 families had checked into hotels in Boulder, unable to stay in their freezing homes. Several others had hired emergency heating services at enormous cost, using electric space heaters that were running up power bills in the thousands of dollars. The local news picked up the story. A reporter from Denver contacted me and I agreed to an interview. So you are refusing to deliver heating oil to Pine Ridge Estates? The reporter, Ashley Garcia, asked. I am not refusing anything. The HOA banned diesel vehicles. I respect their decision. When they change their policy, I will be happy to resume service. Some residents say you are punishing them. The residents did not ban diesel trucks. The HOA board did. Specifically, Patricia Whitmore and Linda Hendricks pushed this through over community objections. I am just following their rules. The story aired that evening and went viral by morning. Suddenly, Pine Ridge Estates was national news, the perfect example of HOA overreach and environmental policy disconnected from reality. Patricia Whitmore was portrayed as the villain, and I was the reasonable businessman being forced to stand by while people suffered because of idiotic regulations. By Wednesday, the pressure was unbearable. The HOA's property management company was fielding hundreds of calls a day. 3 board members were receiving death threats. The county sheriff had to station a deputy at the front gate after someone tried to drive through with heating oil in barrels in their pickup truck, which was not diesel but also was not safe. Wednesday afternoon, I received a call from Tom Bradley. Rick, emergency board meeting tonight at 7. Patricia has agreed to put the diesel ban up for a revote. Can you be there? I will be there. The community center was packed when I arrived, every seat taken and people standing along the walls. The temperature outside was -5. Inside, the heating system was struggling and people were wearing their coats. Patricia called the meeting to order, looking exhausted and defeated. The board has agreed to revisit the diesel vehicle ban in light of unforeseen complications. Unforeseen, someone shouted. We told you this would happen. Patricia ignored the outburst. I move that we suspend the diesel ban temporarily while we explore long-term sustainable alternatives. No, Tom Bradley said. I move that we repeal the diesel ban entirely and issue a formal apology to Rick Ashford and every other service provider we have disrupted. Second, said Jennifer Carmichael. Patricia looked at Linda Hendricks, her last ally, but Linda shook her head slightly. The vice president had apparently seen enough. All in favor? Tom asked. 5 hands went up. The ban was repealed unanimously. The room erupted in applause. Patricia sat there, stone-faced, as her environmental initiative collapsed around her. Rick, can you resume deliveries immediately? Tom asked. I can start tomorrow morning, I said, but I need payment up front from everyone who needs delivery. No exceptions. There were no objections. People started writing checks on the spot. The meeting adjourned, and I was mobbed by grateful residents. Someone suggested taking up a collection to compensate me for the lost week of work, but I waved it off. I had not lost money. I had just delivered to other customers during the gap. As the crowd dispersed, Patricia approached me. I braced for an attack, but instead she just looked defeated. You made your point, she said quietly. This was never about making a point. This was about reality. You cannot wish physics away, Mrs. Whitmore. Mountain living requires mountain solutions. I was trying to do the right thing. No, you were trying to feel good about yourself. The right thing would have been listening to people who actually understand how this community functions. She walked away without responding. Thursday morning, I was back on the mountain with a full load of heating oil. The road conditions were terrible. Everything the electric vehicle advocates did not understand about why diesel trucks were necessary. But my Peterbilt handled it like it always did, powerful and reliable. I spent the next 3 days doing nothing but Pine Ridge deliveries, filling every tank that had run low or empty. The community was effusive in their gratitude, and my tip jar was overflowing. By Sunday, life was back to normal. Heating oil delivered, propane delivered, garbage collected, roads plowed. The diesel trucks were back, and Pine Ridge Estates was functioning again. The following week, I heard through Margaret Chen that Patricia Whitmore had resigned from the HOA board. Linda Hendricks had resigned as well. Tom Bradley was appointed interim president, and he immediately formed a committee to review all HOA policies to ensure they were practical and enforceable. The county also got involved, concerned that the HOA had nearly created a humanitarian crisis. The sheriff's office issued a formal warning that any HOA policy that restricted access to essential services would be subject to county review and potential legal action. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a reporter at a national newspaper who was writing a piece about HOA overreach. She wanted to interview me about the Pine Ridge situation. What do you think HOAs need to understand? She asked. That they exist to serve their communities, not to impose ideologies. When you live in challenging environments, whether that is mountains, deserts, or anywhere else with extreme conditions, you need to make practical decisions based on reality, not fantasy. Banning diesel trucks in a mountain community in winter is like banning air conditioning in Arizona in summer. It is not just stupid, it is dangerous. You think this will change how HOAs operate? Probably not. But maybe Pine Ridge Estates will serve as a cautionary tale. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are people freezing in their expensive homes because the HOA board cared more about feeling environmentally conscious than keeping residents safe. The article ran in January and sparked a broader conversation about HOA authority and limitations. Several states began considering legislation to restrict HOAs from banning essential services or service vehicles. For me, life returned to normal. I continued making my 3 times weekly deliveries up the mountain, through snow and ice and freezing temperatures. The difference was that now, everyone at Pine Ridge Estates understood exactly how important those deliveries were. Tom Bradley became the permanent HOA president after a community election in February. One of his first actions was to pass a resolution formally exempting essential service vehicles from any environmental regulations. Heating oil trucks, propane trucks, emergency vehicles, postal service, garbage collection, and maintenance vehicles would always be allowed, regardless of what they ran on. He also invited me to a board meeting to discuss emergency preparedness. The HOA established a requirement that all residents maintain at least a quarter tank of heating oil at all times during winter months, ensuring no one would ever be caught completely empty if deliveries were disrupted for legitimate reasons like severe weather. In March, I received a handwritten letter from Harold Jenkins, the older resident who had been one of the first to speak up against the diesel ban. "Dear Rick," it read, "I wanted to thank you for standing your ground during the diesel ban crisis. A lesser man might have caved to the pressure or might have exploited the situation for financial gain. You did neither. You simply stood firm on principle and let the natural consequences of bad policy play out." Patricia Whitmore needed to learn that the world does not bend to her wishes, and sometimes the best teacher is reality itself. Our community is better for your integrity. Thank you. I kept that letter on my office wall. April brought a request from the Boulder County Commission to speak at a public hearing about essential services in mountain communities. I drove down and spent an hour explaining to county officials why diesel trucks were not optional luxuries but necessary tools for mountain living. The Commission passed new guidelines requiring HOAs in unincorporated mountain areas to demonstrate that any vehicle restrictions would not impact essential services. It was a small victory, but it mattered. By May, the snow had melted, and Pine Ridge Estates was green and beautiful again. My delivery schedule reduced to once a week as heating demands dropped. Life in the mountains moved on. I ran into Patricia Whitmore one last time, purely by chance, at a coffee shop in Boulder. She was sitting alone with her laptop, and I almost did not recognize her without the professional styling and expensive outdoor wear. She looked tired, our eyes met, and for a moment I thought she might turn away. Instead, she gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Can we talk?" she asked. I sat down, curious. "I owe you an apology," Patricia said. "I have spent the last few months thinking about what happened, and I realize I was completely wrong, not just about the diesel ban, but about my entire approach to that community. What changed your mind?" After I resigned, I started volunteering with a wildlife conservation group in the Rockies. Real conservation work, not just policy meetings. I spent weeks in the backcountry, and you know what vehicles the conservationists use? Diesel trucks. Because they are the only things that can get to remote areas with the equipment we need. I asked one of the senior conservationists about electric vehicles, and he laughed. He said the same thing you did. Physics does not care about your intentions. I sipped my coffee, letting her continue. I moved to Colorado thinking I could recreate my San Francisco life, but with better scenery. I did not understand that mountain living requires completely different thinking. You tried to tell me that. Tom tried to tell me that, but I did not listen. I was so convinced I was right that I nearly caused real harm to people who trusted the HOA to make good decisions. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that I learned something. Maybe that matters, maybe it does not, but I needed to say it. It matters, I said. Not many people can admit when they are wrong, especially not publicly and at personal cost. I lost a lot of friends over that disaster. My husband and I are probably getting divorced. He is tired of my crusading. I am looking for a new place to live, something more modest. Turns out my dream of mountain living was just another form of privilege. So what now? Now I do the work without the ego. I volunteer, I learn, I listen to people who actually know what they are talking about. Maybe eventually I can contribute something useful. We talked for another 20 minutes, and when I left, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not everyone learns from their mistakes, but Patricia Whitmore was at least trying. Summer came, and with it, the off-season for heating oil deliveries. I spent June and July doing maintenance work, preparing for the next winter. Mountain communities depended on being ready, on understanding that the beautiful scenery came with harsh realities. In August, Tom Bradley called to invite me to the Pine Ridge Estate's summer barbecue. Community appreciation event, he said. We want to honor the people who keep this place running. You are at the top of that list. I attended the barbecue on a sunny Saturday afternoon. The community had hung a banner. Thank you to our essential service providers. They gave small plaques to me, the propane delivery drivers, the postal carriers, the garbage collectors, and the maintenance crews. It was awkward and touching in equal measure. During the event, several newer residents approached me with questions about winter preparedness. Word had spread about the diesel ban disaster, and people wanted to make sure they understood what mountain living actually required. I found myself giving an impromptu seminar about heating oil systems, backup generators, emergency supplies, and why diesel trucks were essential infrastructure. People took notes. They asked intelligent questions. They were taking it seriously. This was what community looked like when it worked. People learning from mistakes, preparing for reality, and respecting the infrastructure that made their lifestyle possible. Fall arrived, and with it, the first hints of coming winter. I began my pre-season deliveries in October, making sure every tank was topped off before the snow flew. This time, there were no complaints about diesel trucks, no environmental initiatives that ignored physics, no HOA president who thought good intentions could substitute for practical reality. The first snow fell on November 3rd, and I was ready. My Peterbilt's was maintained, equipped, and prepared for another winter of mountain deliveries. As I drove up the winding road to Pine Ridge Estates, chains crunching on fresh snow, engine rumbling with diesel power, I felt the satisfaction of doing essential work. The guard at the gate, Marcus, waved me through with a grin. Good to see you, Rick. Ready for another winter? Always ready, I said, and I was. Because mountain living required mountain solutions, and diesel trucks were part of that solution whether anyone liked it or not. The difference now was that everyone at Pine Ridge Estates understood and appreciated that fact. The community had learned its lesson the hard way, through cold homes and empty tanks, and the reality that you cannot virtue signal your way through a Colorado winter. They had learned that infrastructure matters, that the people who provide essential services deserve respect, and that HOA boards need to make decisions based on practical reality rather than ideological fantasy. As I made my deliveries that day, stopping at house after house to fill heating oil tanks, I thought about how close this community had come to real disaster. If the winter had been even harsher, if temperatures had dropped even lower, if pipes had frozen and burst, the damage could have been catastrophic. But they had pulled back from that edge, learned their lesson, and changed their approach. That was worth something. By December, I was back to my normal routine. 3 deliveries a week, up and down the mountain, through snow and ice and bitter cold. The road was treacherous as always, but my truck handled it, powerful and reliable, exactly the tool needed for the job. And every time I drove through the gates of Pine Ridge Estates, past the sign that said, "Welcome to Pine Ridge Estates," a mountain community, I was reminded that mountain communities required mountain solutions. Always had, always would. The diesel ban had been a footnote, a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happened when ideology collided with reality. But it was over now, resolved by the simple mechanism of natural consequences and people who were willing to stand firm on principle. Winter deepened, temperatures dropped, and snow accumulated. My diesel truck kept running, kept delivering, kept ensuring that 75 families stayed warm in their mountain homes. That was the job, and I was proud to do it. Because at the end of the day, that is what mountain living required. Practical solutions, reliable infrastructure, and people who understood that you cannot ban your way to utopia. You can only prepare, adapt, and respect the reality of the environment you have chosen to live in. Pine Ridge Estates had learned that lesson. The hard way, but they had learned it. And I would be there, every winter, hauling heating oil up the mountain in my diesel truck, keeping them warm, keeping them safe, and reminding them that some things in life are essential and cannot be replaced by wishful thinking. That was my job. That was my purpose. And that was enough.